All right, everybody. Lee, I can see your face. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I had to stop the video right on that screen because that is one of our presenters today. An awesome dude and Tableau guy as well. We'll be hearing from him from his basement later on in the call from the session. Let me do presenter mode here. All right, you can see my full screen, I assume. So hello, everybody. We're going to get started now. So I believe we are recording. Let me double check that. Yeah, we are recording. Okay, wonderful. North Suburban Chicago Tableau User Group Q3 meeting. Welcome, everybody. My name is Alex Stephen Pataki. I am doing this brief welcome and kickoff. And we'll chat about a couple meeting generalities, and then we'll get into the sessions. We've got 3 great sessions today. You can see Amanda Holman there with the online consumer shopping trends with Brad's deals. Lee Feinberg's going to present a really cool session on dashboards that motivate action without shouting, which is going to be a really great session. Thanks, Lee, for joining us as well. It's great to have a different view of things as well. And then Geoff's basement, we got highlights from Geoff's basement. You can see that in the details there. It's not just going to show us the dust bunnies or anything, but a lot of interesting new things in Tableau, some things that you may know, some things you may not. I think that series, the set actions, that turned Tableau into look and feel of an app. That sounds really interesting. And then there's some of the other bits on ask data, explain data, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be really cool. And then wrap up, sorry, switch sessions there. It's 11:06. Technically, we're a minute late, but I do like to start a couple minutes late to give people time to join. Really quickly, we're going to spend about 20 seconds on this, but just who am I really briefly? Alex Stephen Pataki. I work for Baxter Healthcare. I've been there for 1.5 billion years. I've been kind of collecting degrees, as you can see on the screen. If you look, I'm kind of done with them after this, I think, but I'm getting the data science one, almost done with it right now. Kind of round out that skill set, because with the way the world is today, BI is not enough anymore. It's all about analytics now, and Tableau, as we've seen, is growing into that space as well. They were growing in the past a little bit, then they added Einstein Analytics, right? And that has really accelerated things as well. And we talked about that last quarter, and it's just going to keep growing and getting better, of course. Really briefly as well, where can you find our group? Of course, LinkedIn, which is probably where most of you found us. If you search North Suburban Chicago Tableau User Group, you will find us on LinkedIn very easily. The link is right here. I can put it in the chat, but you probably already have it, which is how you found us. There is a page for our group on the Tableau community site as well. I personally haven't found it super easy to find the page all the time, but the link is here. You can find us on LinkedIn. If you happen to find us there, that's great as well. There should be a link to the LinkedIn from there as well, and back and forth and all that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's what you need to be able to connect with us. If you go to LinkedIn, you find our group. If you want to talk to me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. My link is right there, but you can find it just by my name. And that's it for the moment. I'm going to cede the control to Amanda, who's going to take us into our first session. So thank you, Amanda. I will stop sharing and let you take over.
All right, thank you so much. I am going to leave my video off because I don't know if you guys have this experience, but I find that sometimes the internet is not friendly during these presentations. And can everybody see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. My name is Amanda Holman. I'm a senior data analyst at Brad's Deals, and thanks to the North Suburban Chicago Tableau User Group for having me today. And it's going to be fun to share some of the data and information we've been looking at Brad's Deals for a long time, but has probably been even more on our minds in the past 18 months. This is just a brief agenda of what we're going to review today, and I'm happy to take questions at the end, but feel free to chat any questions as you think about them during the presentation, and we can review them together at the end. I am originally from Kansas City, Missouri, but I have lived in the Chicago area for the majority of my life, so I'm now going to claim Chicago as my, I'm an honorary Chicagoan now. I went to Northwestern University for undergrad and to Loyola for my master's, where I was actually introduced to data mining for the first time back in 2008. That class really changed my focus from traditional brand management marketing into data analysis and all the ways that data has been used in marketing that now just seems intuitive and normal and natural now, but back in 2008, it was pretty new. Also that growing ad tech space, in terms of things like, Google and all the things that were just really, really new at the time. I started using Tableau in 2012 as a desktop user and have since become a Tableau administrator for Tableau Server here at Brad's Deals, which is what we use as our main reporting and insights hub for the business since 2018. There are some links here in this slide that will connect you to public gallery profiles that I've contributed to. And most of my visualizations are around COVID and political donation trends. So what is Brad's Deals? As consumers, right, we've been trained on the mantra of buyer beware. It's kind of one of the first things that we're taught. But as a society and culture, we've made being that savvy and effective consumer really, really difficult. We're, overwhelming consumers with lots of choices. Not all of them are good ones. Consumers are expected to know lots of things, especially as they try to compare goods and services from really large, sophisticated, and well-resourced companies that don't always have their interests at heart, or are, interests may not be aligned. And unfortunately, the pandemic really has created lots of opportunities for people to be taken advantage of online. The FTC recently reported that COVID scams have cost consumers more than $500 million, with online shopping really receiving the majority of those complaints. So more than ever, people are really seeking safety and value in their online shopping experience. For the past 20 years, Brad's Deals has been focused on being the safest place on earth to shop. Safe for consumers because we don't promote any product or seller who's fraudulent, and safe for retailers for advertising, especially those small to medium-sized retailers who are really trying to compete with some of the largest companies in the history of humankind. So it becomes harder and costlier for these merchants to reach customers online when you've got such big internet giants controlling search results and placing ads in places that may not be, for the benefit of these smaller to medium-sized companies. So Brad's Deals is a marketplace and really is a best boutique alternative to larger sites like an Amazon, mainly because we are really the only seller agnostic merchandising and marketing platform out here. So our service is really simple. We have a team of in-house editors that find the best deals for a given product or service, and we share those deals with users who've signed up either to receive our daily emails or that use our apps. Brad's Deals does receive a commission from retailers based on the performance of sales, but also things like new user exposure and other goals. We post about 45,000 deals annually, and we communicate with about 7 million shoppers daily with our daily newsletter. And that newsletter features our top 30 deals, which many of them are personalized to individual shopper interests. So this dashboard is really one of the first ones we ever built at Brad's Deals when we first introduced Tableau to the business back in 2018. When we worked in our physical office together, this was one of several dashboards that we would rotate on a large screen display in our lunchroom. And this chart measures the amount of money we're saving users monthly by calculating the difference between an MSRP, or a manufacturer's suggested retail price, and the sale price that we have posted and negotiated oftentimes with the merchant themselves on our site. In 2020, we saved our users around $222 million. And we're always looking for new products and services that will help give our users more of that consumer competitive advantage. Now I'm going to talk about kind of how our data function is organized at Brad's Deals and where analytics fits in. So analytics at Brad's Deals, we're a small company. I think we're about 85, 86 full-time employees right now. And so we have to use a hybrid model between balancing that centralization and decentralization because of our size and just the variety of data we really use. So being one piece of a larger data team means that we're directly involved in planning and prioritization with the other two functions of our department, which are data science and data engineering, and vice versa. They can help inform, our list of tasks and priorities as much as we can inform theirs. We become a hub then for new data requests and asks. So we kind of become like the tip of the spear when new questions come up. So we are also then a hub for pushing out new data sets and definitions and dashboards, rather than kind of letting individual departments and groups manage that completely on their own. And we can then be, loosely dedicated to specific departments. For instance, I work quite a bit with our editorial team. Much of the content you'll see here comes from work that we've done with them. And doing it in that way kind of really does encourage that collaboration and just greater insight to understand how will this team actually consume and use the information that we're putting in front of them. Now, because we are about a company of 85 and hoping to grow in the coming months, with only 3 analysts as full-time folks on the team, it does require us to be decentralized as well by really empowering departments to edit and tweak dashboards as they need to, customize alerts and subscriptions, and kind of add new data sources to our Tableau server as well. So some of the shopping trends that we observed during the pandemic, luckily, this is just a sampling of some of the data we have, used Brad's Deals for a long time. But this is the data that we probably use the most in a daily sense. So on the left, we have deals, which we kind of determine as our supply and think of as our supply. And here's just some of the different dimensions at which we kind of look and understand our deals. But then also the engagement, what's the demand? What are the consumer interests bringing out? Also, in addition to this, which is kind of more of that front-facing, how are consumers engaging with our content, we also have a lot of dashboards set up to look for anomalies. So for instance, if data engineering process doesn't run the way we thought it would, or if there's some sort of migration that didn't happen, not only do we use Tableau to help inform, our internal users about things happening on our site, we also use it then to help us know, oh, something didn't run last night. We're missing, a large count of searches or a large count of email opens. So it really does help us get into data hygiene and data cleanliness as well. So then in terms of some of the stuff that we were looking at and understanding, as early as April 2020, we could really see changes in our daily traffic volume compared to previous Aprils. This is just a simple line chart that shows average page views for a user by month. And throughout this presentation, when I talk about pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, pre-pandemic we're defining here as January 2019 through mid-March 2020. At least for Illinois, that's about when, right, schools closed, businesses closed, our attention got heightened, although we know that the pandemic, began officially in the world, I believe, in January of 2020. But for the purposes of this presentation, we'll say pre-pandemic is, January through mid-March 2020, and then pandemic period begins March 15th through the present, unfortunately. And you can really see that our average page views, both across our site and apps, are up for every calendar month since the pandemic began. So this means that users are really looking at more content on a daily basis than ever before. Using the top 10 filter feature in Tableau, it's very easy to kind of hone in on what were our most clicked or most in demand deals to our site. Historically, 2 categories have really been consistently popular for us. Women's deals, apparel, accessories, handbags, etc., and credit card deals. While women's deals, kind of can come and go based on, the retailer's goals for a particular sales weekend, or when there's a lot of inventory and availability of a product. Credit card deals kind of live on our site for a long period of time, so they really do have a longer opportunity to be clicked on and to be engaged with. But interestingly, if we look at 2020, right, those categories really did change, and they grew and became more, varied. We went from 2 categories of women and credit cards being our top clicked on, engaged with deals, to now 6. So patio, home, electronics, and shoes got added to that top 10 list. Now, if we go, look at 2021 thus far, we are showing some return to pre-pandemic trends in terms of apparel, which wasn't kind of a big deal in terms of wearing new and fashionable clothes in 2020, because really it was hard for anyone to see you in them. And then credit cards, right? People were nervous financially. People use this opportunity to pay down a tremendous amount of credit card debt in some cases. So credit card usage, softened in 2020. So it's interesting to see in 2021 that these are, kind of somewhat returning to their, places in the top 10 here. But something that we'll continue to look at for 2021, especially with Q4 coming, very shortly. This is a scatter plot kind of looking at our trends with publishing deals by certain categories. So farther to the right means that we've had an increase in supply, a greater change in supply compared to pre-pandemic times. And then as you go, to the left, that means less supply. So less availability of those types of deals on our site. And going up means more demand, more opportunities, right, for people to click on these things, more interest. And then as you go down, that means that people are not as interested in those. So we see that also, that's travel and credit cards, being over there in that lower left quadrant. We didn't publish as many, there wasn't as much demand for them, which totally makes sense. Now, if we look at what's up in the upper right quadrant, patio, lawn and garden, food and drink. So not surprising, right, that these would be big changes, just because that is reflecting somewhat, one, the availability, but also consumer interest. So, we started to, think about, okay, how do we start to really make sure that we are not kind of perpetuating an echo chamber, right? We produce or, publish these deals, people click on them, and it can be very easy to, say, okay, well, if people are clicking on them, they want them. That's true, but it's also a function of what we're providing. So how do we make sure we are not just, living in an echo chamber of saying, yep, the more we publish of these things, the more demand there will be, because if you put it there, people will click on it. So we started to look at search terms. So these would be terms, right, that you enter when you come to our site. And if maybe, you're looking for a particular product or a particular brand, that's kind of one of our ways that we can look at what's new. What are the things that consumers are thinking of that we're not necessarily thinking of, and making sure that we're publishing deals that can reflect their interests and needs in a more real-time way. So we put this dashboard together back in April of 2020, in fact, and we used this to kind of help our editors find the deals that were new, in terms of new needs, and anticipate some new asks from our customer base. So this dashboard can be sorted by the columns that you see here. The most important kind of being the one on the farther right, the percentage change. So you can compare it to 2 different time periods based around an anchor date. So this allows our editors to kind of see what were the terms that have some staying power. Because, as you know, going from 1 to 10 searches, while that may be a huge percentage increase, 10 searches for something, is not necessarily a trend, right? It's not necessarily something we would want our editors to spend time on, but something going from, 100 searches to 1,000 searches, that's something that, we would want to take a look at. So you can kind of quickly see in this example, we use masks as the search string. And you can really see down here in that bottom graph kind of how quickly masks came back into popularity on our site. Then I'm sure some of that driven by the increase in the Delta variant and hospitalizations and cases that we've seen recently. But also, I think also back to school shopping, right? Also push shoppers back to our site to look for things like masks again. And, kind of these trending terms, unfortunately, masks, toilet paper, streaming, the red background just indicates the rise in Delta variant cases that unfortunately we're still experiencing. So, seeing these terms come back kind of helps us get a sense of where people are going and thinking about for the coming weeks, that these are things that are top of mind for them. So in terms of kind of, I know that many of us may have experienced looking for something that we want to purchase and being told it's just not available. Or it will be just in a few weeks, or not exactly the brand or particular product we specifically want. So this is another tab of that same dashboard where now you can kind of look at a specific term. And as you see here, there's a lot of color and variation. I know we're violating a very important rule of not having too many colors, but we do allow the colors here just to show kind of the long tail of all the ways that patio can be entered into the search term box on our site. So, kind of what we're seeing here is, right, an initial, starting back in March of 2020, some initial interest in patio, which is typical for us as well. And in any non-pandemic year, spring and summer being key times to buy. But then if you look farther to the right, in terms of starting even earlier in the year compared to previous years, just the demand for patio has just really increased. The challenges have been, for brick and mortar stores, right? They have limitations in their supply chains, from both a physical limitation on storage space, but then just getting the product itself. Chemical plant and refinery closings in Ohio and Texas have really constrained many of the industry's raw materials, such as upholstery foam. We've got, as we know, the Suez Canal earlier this year, shipping containers from overseas kind of stacking up in our various ports. Lack of truckers then to deliver the stuff from the ships to stores, and just a general, lower availability of workers has really put challenges in the furniture space, and this has been predicted to last until possibly 2023. But for us, patio, lawn, and garden have been a huge category, mainly because we can pull deals from lots of different sources, and we're able to present more variety and availability than many of the brick and mortar stores can. So while pickings may be slim at the local Costco and Home Depot, we've never really had a problem finding a lot of patio furniture at different price points. Also, this increased searching, for patio items on the site really does speak to the fact that consumers are really hunting for more product and availability and variety. Overall, sadly, prices are rising. So a wise friend to me said back in 2020 that if it isn't on sale, it needs to be on fire. Well, 2021 has a different plan for us. In terms of pre-pandemic, right, the average deals of our site, the average price of deals on our site continues to be lower than the average prices prior to the pandemic. But as you see, really since February, prices are moving up on average. For our data specifically, this average could be driven up by a greater supply of travel deals. As travel has reopened, we have added more travel deals. Typically those can be flight deals, hotel combinations, cruises, etc. But we know that travel is seeing large increases in prices as well, because they're trying to make up for that lack of business travel. I recently priced a rental car for a cousin's wedding in Detroit, and I was really shocked to see an economy rental car asking for $100 a day, when we've all been really accustomed to hunt for that $20 a day or less daily rate. So we're going to continue to keep an eye on pricing for Q4, especially because that's an interesting time to watch, and we'll be looking at this for that upcoming holiday shopping season. So overall, the pandemic really has changed many behaviors. It's still influencing consumers' behaviors, and the data we're collecting and analyzing reflects these trends. Our Tableau server platform and the dashboards we've created have really been critical to helping us get these insights to the right teams at the right times within the business. And the consumers are changing the brands and companies they're open to, for availability reasons, pricing. Many of these brands may not be available anymore from just a consolidation perspective. Social reputation is playing more and more of an important role in how people shop. With many people moving to new places, the physical location where they can pick up these products may be different. So, we will be investing more analytic and development resources and really helping our merchants and retailers kind of take advantage of this new and unfortunately more complicated marketplace. So in order to do that, we need more help. We are currently hiring for a data analyst to join our team. If you have interest in the role or know someone who would be pretty awesome to join us, please be in contact with me, and feel free to follow us. We have lots of social platforms in which we are doing some interesting, cool stuff on. If you're a TikToker, I do recommend TikTok as well. But please check us out. Here's some links to Brad's deals, and thank you very much for your time. Are there any questions?
Any participants should be able to unmute themselves. Everyone is muted by default, so you'd have to unmute yourself, but you should be able to do it. Okay, well.
Oh, hey, I've got a question. Sorry, I was slow on the mute button or unmute button. I'm curious if you're, outside of the example that you showed, with like the patios, what looks like it's going to be maybe in short supply over the coming months?
That is a great question. I am not as close to kind of the anticipation piece. Our editors are pretty good at kind of sensing that information. I don't know if it's really necessarily any one thing. I yesterday went to the grocery store and I couldn't get Sara Lee cheese or ham at a Jewel Osco here in the Skokie area. And so I think it's going to be really all over the board that we're going to see shortages and things. So I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that. I don't think I've ever been in a place where Sara Lee ham and cheese was not available,
I see people can post questions in the Q&A as well. There's a question posted, but all it is Elena just says, thank you for the very interesting presentation. So thank you, Elena, for the comment. Appreciate that. I'll ask one question. You mentioned how the price to consumers of like a rental car has gone way, way, way up. Have you seen, in your reporting that you've done, a drop in demand to match the increase in prices, or are people still renting no matter what the price is?
I think that people are still renting. Unfortunately, if people don't feel comfortable flying, and with the, not the greatest availability of non, airline transit,
Yeah.
I think the challenge is people have to do what they have to do. People are still buying, they're just not doing it at the savings rate that I think we would all like, and we like to promote and share, right, with our users. But people are still renting, just because I don't think many of them have a choice if they need to go a great distance, and flying just is either too expensive or they just don't feel safe doing so.
Have you done any other reporting on demand versus price changes? Maybe not related to transport, because transport is a safety issue, I realize. But there's other things that are changing during the pandemic about supply and demand, right? And the demand for certain things are going down. They're not all related to transport, which is, like you said, a safety issue for some people. I haven't been on a plane in at least 18 months, right? Same idea.
Right. So I think in the case, like, it depends on what it is. So for instance, like computers, discounts on computers really are not as big as they were pre-pandemic. Just, we know, and I think many of us have read about the challenges in getting semiconductors and getting, just the equipment off of ships and shipped to the various places of points of sale, or even delivery to your home if the sale's already happened and now you're just waiting for delivery for your items. But yes, I think things that are hot electronic items we kind of tend to keep an eye on. I know for a long time coffee was a big thing that people would buy through our site. I read recently that Vietnam has been dealing with some pretty severe COVID lockdowns, and I believe Vietnam supplies somewhere like a third, maybe to a fourth of Europe's coffee supply. So, I think it's really a truly global phenomenon. As I was working on this presentation, I downloaded COVID case data from the CDC, and added it to this. And I started thinking, well, gosh, I mean, with the way that our world is set up, we really need a daily COVID global count, because cases rising in Vietnam, cases rising in China and other places really do affect the availability of products, here in the US. So while the CDC numbers give us certainly a picture locally, if we want to talk about movement of goods and pricing of goods, we probably do need to start thinking more globally about, case volume and various governments' responses to trying to keep cases under a certain level, or manageable at least.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Don't see any other questions in the Q&A. Anyone else with any last questions that they have at the moment?
Hi, this is Lee. I actually have a question. Can you give us a short story about what you would consider to be your biggest success with Tableau?
Oh, there's so many, so many stories. Because when I first started at Brad's Deals, we were really truly decentralized. And so many groups had, reports that they pulled, that they were trained on how to pull, but there was no documentation on things like, what filters were applied, and, why was this report set up this way? So the first thing with, by introducing Tableau Server and getting Tableau, was having that one source of truth. And I remember, literally hours of my life being lost pre-Tableau to, well, my report says 1,702, but this other person's report says 944. So spending, just, eliminating the time of arguing over whose number was right was a huge, huge step forward. for us. So being able to use that common data source for, whether it be revenue or clicks or kind of whatever you're looking at, that just eliminated a lot of time. And also, it gives people confidence in the data, because if everybody has different numbers, now everybody is questioning and wondering, well, is this right? Can we trust this? So I think Tableau has done a lot, not just from a organizational perspective of getting us to focus on the right thing at the right time, but also lending a huge amount of credibility to the data team and the amount of work that goes into prepping the data, modeling it properly, and making sure that it's available 24/7 for people that need it. So Tableau has just made consistent communication and increasing the confidence in the product that people are consuming through the dashboards just that much more higher, and gets us to move to, I think, higher order conversations about not just what is it, but now kind of what do we do, or what more do we think we need to know before we can make a decision.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you again, Amanda, for the session. That was really interesting, and interesting to hear a little bit about how the data is how the data is showing up on your site as it relates to the pandemic. It's interesting to see the changes that are happening. So thanks again. And with that, our next session is Lee. So I'm going to pass it to Lee. And Lee, you could take it away and start sharing.
Great. Thanks, Alex. I'm going to do exactly what Amanda did, which is say hi on video for just a minute and then pop off so that I can make sure we get a good amount of bandwidth for what's much more important than looking at me. So thanks for spending some time with me. And let me get the screen share going. And there we go. Great. So I'm coming to you from Westfield, New Jersey, where we are getting more rain, but not any flooding yet. That's been our experience over the last couple of weeks if you've been following us over here on the East Coast. And what I want to talk to you today is about some ideas that might seem a little bit different than what you're observing going on out there in the Tableau community. I look at the problem of working with any kind of analytics and visualization as a communications problem. It's not a technical problem necessarily about choosing the best charts or mastering all the great functions in Tableau, but ultimately the goal of all of this is to get your ideas across, just like what Amanda was showing us, and ultimately doing something about it, which is making decisions and taking action. You're going to hear me say those words a few times today. What I want to start off with is telling you that maybe some of these things that you're experiencing where you're maybe not having as much success as you had hoped aren't your fault. And I'm going to point out what some of those areas are and how to get over them. And I'm sure you have some of the same experiences that I've had over the years where you put a lot of energy and thinking into creating a dashboard. And once you get it out to your users, for some reason, it's not really creating the kinds of insights that you had hoped people would get, and they're not really engaging with it the way you had expected. And so you start to wonder, what's going wrong? Why did I do this? Is this a worthwhile project? And I've felt that same way. And what I've been spending the last 15 years doing is trying to figure out how to fix those kinds of problems, make my skills better, and ultimately to be doing that work in a smarter way rather than just struggling through it. So as Alex said, my name's Lee Feinberg, and really going to share some practical solutions with you today over the next 30 minutes so that you can start knocking some of these problems down to size. And I'll give you some tools that will really, you can follow step by step so that not only can you do this once, but you can repeat these activities over and over again, because that's really what's most important is being able to make this part of how you do your work. And what I'm going to expose you to doesn't really matter if you're an advanced dashboard designer or you're just starting out with Tableau Creator. This should really be able to save you time and help you have more impact. And I'm going to introduce 3 ideas that I'll say will upend maybe how you think about data visualization. And I know that might sound a bit dramatic, but I've really seen the change happen over and over with my clients. And not only is it helping their companies achieve more, but in many times it's actually helping them personally with their careers, which of course is, I expect, important to each of you. So here I am over here, and I want to share something I'm proud of. Actually, Amanda said she's been working with COVID, and my daughter attends James Madison University, and last year I volunteered to help them overhaul their COVID dashboard. I'm not bringing this up to brag about myself or my work with them, but what I'm bringing it up is because of the same problem they have that many of us have, which is they have a lot of data. A lot of it, in fact, was new data that they hadn't worked with before as COVID was really surging and everybody was trying to get a handle on it. And what they did is just start creating charts and putting them up and not really thinking about what was the message they wanted to communicate, because they had a very wide audience. They have parents, they have students, they have politicians, they have faculty, and the list goes on, because their work was put up on Tableau Public so anybody could see it. And that's what we really need to get into today, is focusing on this idea of communication. And that's what my company does, DecisionViz. We are more of a management consulting firm and helping our clients build what we call an army of trustworthy decision makers, because that's what we want people to focus on, is the end product, which is that making decisions and taking action on it. Now, one thing I love in the world, not as much as my daughter, is Tableau. And I started DecisionViz in 2012, so I'm getting close to 10 years, and the company is a Tableau partner. And before that, I was actually a Tableau customer for several years, and the project I ran was the largest Tableau install worldwide at the time. And since then, I've run 2 Tableau user groups for 8.5 years, and I was a Tableau ambassador for 4 years. I've worked with the Tableau Foundation, and I also teach a class at New York University called Visual Analytics with Tableau. So as I said, I really love Tableau. Now, having said all that, being successful with Tableau, being successful with data visualization requires more than being good at Tableau. You have to have other skills, like being data literate, like focusing on the ideas that Amanda brought up about bringing the data together, having that consistency, having a single point of view. And I'm sure most of you are pretty good with Tableau, but you'll see that there's some things you can do to really elevate that a little bit more. So the 3 ideas I want to cover today, one is that visualization is a language you have to learn. So there are rules, there's guidelines, there's strategies, just like with any other language that you've learned. And with the right amount of practice, like languages, you can master the language of visualization. I want you to understand that color has the ability to clarify, but it also has the ability to confuse. So we're going to look at a couple of case studies and some techniques for transforming poor use of color in dashboards to where color is delivering a clear message. And third is the goal of creating dashboards, as I've said, is to conduct an analysis and answer questions. Here's the challenge. Most dashboards are actually set up in a way that goes against how the audience is prepared to consume the information. And we'll talk about what that is and some simple ways that you can change how the audience connects to your work. So let me share a little analogy first about this idea of how visualization is the language you have to learn and goes beyond learning the features and functions of whatever software you're using, in this case, most likely Tableau. So imagine that your company wants you to be good at writing, say writing in English. So they train you on all the features and functions of Microsoft Word. Makes sense, right? But here's the thing. They don't teach you anything about the English language, how to construct a sentence or how to craft a story. So you're really good at the software, but you actually don't know anything about communication. So maybe you write something like this. Just put a lot of words together. You don't necessarily make a lot of sense. Now, with a little bit of work, I'm sure you figured out what that phrase is, which is much easier to understand. And that's the point of what's happening with the way many people work in our industry. Your company has probably invested a lot of time and money to train you on Tableau, or maybe you spent a lot of your own time or money learning Tableau, and you know how to use the software. You might be very adept at knowing where all the key features and functions are. But if you really haven't been exposed to this idea of the language of visualization or data storytelling or data literacy, you're not going to get as much out of the software. It doesn't really how many buttons you click. The visuals you create aren't going to hold up as well when it comes to actually putting them into use when people are trying to take some kind of action because of what you're showing for them. And I said earlier on, it's not really your fault. The problem here, and I'm going to say I don't really have a particular solution of why this happened or reason why this happens, is management just assumes that the software magically helps you be great at writing visual stories that are going to engage people and persuade them to take your recommendations. And maybe the reason is that Tableau looks so easy to use, which of course is a great thing, that they look at that and say, well, this is so simple, we'll just get to use it and we don't really have to do anything more. Now, most of you probably know that that is a bad assumption and that companies are really missing a lot of opportunities to get the most out of their data because of that. So before we dive into some of these specific case studies on how to make the work better, I just want you to understand a little bit about how the brain is set up when it comes to this language of visualization. So all of us have the ability to recognize complex patterns, and it's literally in the blink of an eye. So I want to share an idea that every time I actually think about it, it still blows my mind. And because your brain is working so fast, as soon as it sees an image, it's starting to process it. So your brain is starting to figure out what it means on its own before you're actually taking direct effort to think about what that means. Now, what's the problem with that? If that image isn't showing information that gets the message across correctly, or if it's confusing, it's going to slow your reader down from understanding what's in there. And the longer it takes them to figure it out, that could cause them to be inclined to just ignore it or move on to the next thing. Think about when you're browsing the internet and you're at a web page and it's confusing to you, what do? You just go on to another website Because you're frustrated and you're just thinking you don't want to waste your time with this bad experience. It's the same kind of thing here. But if we can harness the brain's processing power, then you're going to be able to let your audience wade through that large amount of information and get to making those decisions. That's what I want you to take away from this. So what is it exactly that's going on inside all of our heads that lets us see these patterns, and what are the patterns? So I call these the 5 traits. And there are many different patterns, of course, in visualization. These are just the 5 most common ones. And these, of course, are going to look familiar to you. You just may not have thought about them exactly as patterns. So there's location and size, gradients, and color. So we'll talk about how gradient and color are different, and shape. And of course, your brain isn't looking just for each of these, right? It can handle them when they come in combination, because a lot of times when we're doing visualization, we might be using some of these together. So once you understand how the brain is actually interpreting each of these, you can use them in a better way. You can be more conscious about how you're using the options in Tableau rather than just clicking the option and saying, I'll just use size now. You can be much smarter about it. And you'll know why you're making the choice to use that particular trait. Here's a thought that might seem strange. So while you are probably thinking that visualization software is easy to use, which I've already said, something like Tableau is very easy to use, that's not necessarily a good thing. So let me tell you why I say that. When you're using the software, what happens is you're treating each of these traits and patterns equally, because all it takes is a click to put them out on any kind of chart. The problem is these traits are not equal when it comes to how the brain processes them. Some are actually easier for the brain to process. So I call this a hierarchy when things are easier or harder to process. Obviously, it's not the same as a hierarchy in Tableau. So consider this example. So depending on what you're trying to communicate, you should try to use size before gradients, because size is easier for the brain to interpret. And if you have to choose between color and shape, you should try to use color. It doesn't mean that shape in this case is bad. It just means it's harder for the brain to work with. Now, when you do go against the hierarchy, or you just use it completely in the wrong way, it will cause the audience to have to work harder to figure out what that visual actually means. And I'm pretty sure all of you agree, if it's harder for someone to interpret something correctly, that's not good for folks like us who are analysts, because our job is to make it easy for people to actually interpret what the data is without having to work too hard. Now, I showed you 5 traits, but the one I'm going to focus on today are color and gradients, because I would say they're probably the most used, and they're also the most abused. So we'll breaking these down with a couple of dashboards and see where they're not following the hierarchy and how to get them in better shape. So before I go into that, let me tell you what I mean by abuse. And many of you might start nodding your head as I go through these. So first, just using too many gradients or colors on your dashboard. And when that happens, nothing is standing out. So the reader is having problems figuring out what's important because your eye is attracted to these different colors and gradients. The second one is using the same gradient or color to represent more than one thing on your dashboard. So that what happens there is it's messing with your brain, because it's harder for the reader to understand what's going on, because they see the same colors, but they mean 2 completely different things. And last is just using color when it's not needed, because they think that it has some kind of meaning, and when it doesn't, they're trying to assign something to it, and they're just taking energy and kind of getting off track. Now, I could list many more violations but we don't have time, and I want to focus on these couple of areas to help you along. And I'm going to show you two dashboard examples as case studies, and these are both real dashboards that I pulled off of, I think, Tableau Public. So in this particular one, the author seems to like the orange gradient quite a bit. Now, the first thing you might notice is without the color legends, it's really hard to know what is really going on with this dashboard because we don't understand what the gradients represent. We've also got these green headers, we've got a gray background, and this pie chart also uses some of those same colors, which is also making it even more confusing. And the one thing to remember is the goal of color is to make your message stand out and to clarify. When you start using it to make things pretty, when you start using it to make something, I'll say in quotes, pop, that's when you start getting into trouble, and you're probably going to confuse the reader when they're just trying to get through your message. One thing you'll see here, there is using a gray background behind everything. I recommend just sticking with white, because that way when you need the gray, you can use it in your charts. If you were to use that same gray in your charts here, it would just kind of blend in. When I went back and added the color legends in Tableau, I immediately saw some problems, which is what I had expected to see. It's using the same orange gradient for the measure amount expended, but the range is different on each of the charts. So if the range is different, but it's the same color, then you can't use this at all for making any kind of decisions because everything's going to be disconnected. And then, as I mentioned, some of those oranges are also used in the pie chart and the green for the heading. So it's kind of all over the place. So let's see how we can actually use that hierarchy to look at a solution. So the hierarchy, number one, just helps you understand the order of how information is processed and what's easier, but it's also a mechanism to take a visual and rework it in a systematic way. So if we take the pie chart, if you think about a pie chart and break it down into its pieces, it's using size for the size of the slices. It's using color to distinguish the slices. And then it's also using labels to encode the data by showing you some extra information. It's really actually quite a lot for the brain to process, even though sometimes it seems quite simple. So here's the idea that was going to help you take a visual and simplify it using the hierarchy. When you want to simplify the visual, where you start is with removing the hardest trait, or trying to at least remove the hardest trait. In this case, when we look at a pie chart, the hardest trait for the brain to process is going to be color. So we have to say, how can we get rid of color? Well, if we just took the color away and leave the pie, that doesn't help now, right? Because we've just got the slices. We can tell them apart a little bit because they've got borders, but it's certainly not as easy. So what if there was a way now to take the size element of this and show this, use the size in a different way? Well, we could do that if we just take those slices and turn them into bars. This immediately becomes a really big improvement. So one thing I could recommend to you, which is just the kind of conclusion of this little exercise, is when you've got a pie chart, really think hard about just making it into a bar chart, even if you have 2 or 3 slices. Okay. Certainly when you get above that, you definitely want to go with a bar chart. I want to point out one more common problem in general, but happens a lot for some reason with pie charts. I'm not really sure why, which is really showing too much information. So in this example, the pie chart, they're showing 191 million all the way down to single digits. And I really doubt that knowing the value all the way down to that level is going to influence any kind of decision that's going to be made. So really, you could just show it as a single decimal point, or maybe even no decimals and just make it rounded to something like 192 million. Of course, it's really going to depend on your business, how much you need to see there. I just encourage you to think, if you see yourself using all the way the entire number, reconsider and think if you can shorten it up some way. Let's take a look at all the other pieces of this dashboard and see what we can do to simplify it. One part of the dashboard that tends to not get much love, I'll say, is the title. But the job of the title is really important because it sets the reader's expectations about what's going to happen on the rest of the page. And unfortunately, a lot of times what I see is something like what's on here. You get a logo and some kind of vague description. City spending. That can mean so many different things, especially depending on who the audience is. They may have their own thought about what they're going to see. So if you can be more specific and detailed, what happens is it really tunes the reader into the message that you want to communicate. Don't leave it up to them to guess what it is or make it up on their own. So when I looked at this whole dashboard in totality, and I think it's pretty obvious, but I'll just say it, this is about showing data for spending for 1 year. In this case, the filter is shown for 2021. So I think that should be part of the title. So we can think about that. If we can somehow combine that into a more compelling story. So I looked at that area with the filter, I looked at this big number, and I felt that I could condense it down into something like this, which gets all that information across in a much cleaner way. So maybe this is a one little trick that you can use to help make that, as I said, better connection with the audience right from the get-go. One thing that you've probably been exposed to is this idea that people will start reading a dashboard from the left or from the top down. So in that case, this would be the first chart that somebody would see. Now, since we took the area above that, we've got a little bit more space we can play with. So keep that in mind. And one thing here is this list is sorted alphabetically, but it would be better to sort it high to low for several reasons. One, there's scrolling here, so we don't know, there may be higher values below here. These might not be the highest or lowest values. So we don't want to have a lot of scrolling back and forth. That's just a bad user experience. Also here, we don't necessarily know where all of the values lie compared to each other either, right? Because they're all spread out alphabetically. So we really want to understand how things are grouped. So I think using a gradient is still a good idea, but let's just sort it alphabetically. So if we do that and take into account we've got some more space, here's the new version of that. So now we can see all the information at a glance. We don't have any scrolling, and I can see how things are grouped in terms of the range of the gradient. So next thing I want to tackle is the pie chart, which we've already done. So we can see how that just fits in there. And you'll notice, again, in terms of real estate, which is really important, a pie chart takes up a lot of space and you tend to not have a lot of control over how big it is. So using a bar chart also gives you more control to free up space for other elements on your dashboard, right? We always want to be conscious of how we're using the space. This last one, or sorry, this bar chart down here that we've got to tackle the gradients on is really looking to show some kind of trend. But really, if you're trying to show a trend, you should consider a line chart. And if we do that, we get that. Again, we're able to compact it a little bit more. And then these last two gradients, again, we don't really need the gradient here, or really don't want to use the gradient because we've already got it on the one chart, which is the most important one to show it on, which is the lead. So we can just go to some bar charts here and use that neutral gray. So this is a much simpler version of that chart, and we've done it in the same amount of space, but we're not done yet. There's one more step that is really going to improve that idea of communicating the message and unifying what you've started talking about in the title. So, right, because all of this has to work together. We want the title of the dashboard and all the titles of each of the charts to work together. But there's a strange contradiction, as I mentioned in the beginning of this talk, in the behavior of dashboard authors. So the goal of the dashboard is to answer questions, because that's what people are looking at it, the dashboard for. They have questions in mind. Yet the way that information tends to be presented on dashboards is in the form of a statement. So for example, this says, what is the breakdown? Oh, sorry. I changed, let me go take a step back here. So let's start with the title here. What is the spending in the fiscal year is just a statement. So if we just make a small change and put it in the form of a question, it just starts to invite you in to study the dashboard. It's setting you up to think, what am I going to see here? Well, I'm going to see how it's broken down into some kind of components, right? And then we've still got that total spend piece. And now let's look at a couple examples of what we can do with each of the charts. So here, instead of money spent by department, we can turn that into a simple question. How much did each department spend? I know it might seem like I'm just saying this is kind of semantics. Well, does it really matter if it's a statement or a question? I say yes. I think you should maybe see for yourself in the long run how it works out. You might find that when you start to put it in the form of a question, it makes you actually rethink if the way you're showing the information is the best way to get your point across. These questions really will, create that curiosity in your reader more naturally than a statement would. It makes them want to think about the data, whereas they look at it and go, oh yeah, spend. All right, I got it. And they're not really giving it the attention that you hope they would. So let's just take one more example here. And the, say, money spent by month on the line chart. We can just change that as to what is the monthly spending trend. So again, might seem trivial, but I at least ask that you give it some consideration to see if it helps you. So one more example. Here's another one where they're using the same colors to represent 4 completely different sets of information. Here, at least, they've kind of got the legends out here. And again, what's happening is your brain says, oh, I see light blue. Well, there's 4 areas of light blue on the dashboard. They must all have some relationship, but there is no connection between them. So it's really confusing. And of course, we've got layers of that because we've got blues, we've got purples, right? All these colors that overlap. So colors, again, they're powerful, but you have to be purposeful when you're using them and which ones you choose and how it interacts with all the other colors in the design, and not just on this page of a dashboard, but if you have multiple dashboards that you're showing, you want to have consistency throughout it. You don't want to have blues mean something on this page and then they flip the next page and you're using blue, but it means something completely different because they've already made an association. So you have to really take care when you're doing this. And a lot of times, if you're just accepting the defaults in the software, that's where this problem will happen. Now, my guess is that the author of this dashboard was using so many colors, they wanted to make it look cool. And I also think that because they've used 4 different chart types in here, especially these bubble charts and tree maps, which are, I would say, a little bit fancier and out of the ordinary than most people might be used to seeing. And remember, the goal is not to look cool. Sure, if it's an infographic, you might want to jazz it up a little bit, but if you go too far, you're really getting off message. So let's break this one down. We already know what to do with a pie chart. We're just going to make that into a bar chart, just like we did before. the bar chart that we've got in the upper right corner, we've got these two blues, but we've got a light blue and a dark blue, which almost feels more like a gradient, which really should be used for measures, meaning values. But here, upstream and downstream are actually dimensions. So it's better to show that as two unique colors rather than two shades of the same color. So we can just use red and blue. That's just what I chose. This bubble chart in the bottom right corner is like a pie chart. Instead of the size on slices of a pie chart, it's on size of the bubble. So we turn that into a bar chart as well. This is shaping up pretty nicely. The thing that struck me the strangest was this tree map is actually showing geographic information. Why not just show it as a map? Let's dive into this one a little bit more. Once you start thinking more about visualization as a language and that hierarchy, it's going to be easier for you to think of creating a visual like this if you may have started with something like those 4 different visuals and all of the colors and different things going on with it. And here, we're really using colors to highlight the data. Now, when I say color, I want to be very specific because I'm talking about 2 different things. One is gradient, right? And a gradient is a measure, and it's showing either a single shades of a single color or shades of multiple colors. Colors is actually unique individual colors, in this case, red and blue, and those are used with dimensions. So you just have to be careful because in something like Tableau and other software, you can actually use measure dimensions on gradients and things like that so that you can technically do things that aren't really proper in their terms of use. And again, keep that idea of a neutral gray to use when you don't really have to make any particular data stand out. Let's give this one that final treatment, talking about the titling and see how it can pull it all together. You may have noticed that the first dashboard I showed didn't even have a title. So that's going to be very difficult because how are you even going to know what you're trying to look at? If you actually had seen in the bottom corner, it was referencing a study that was done. So I just put that out here front and center. What are the profiles from this survey? So I think this is pretty straightforward, clear, and concise. Now let's take a look at a few of the titles of the charts and see if we can change them from a statement into the form of a question. So we'll start in the upper right corner, respondents by revenue. I think if we go with something like, what is the revenue distribution? It gives a much more succinct and idea that hits in a much more straightforward way and ties the user into what you really want them to think about, not just, by revenue. And for the map, respondents by regional cluster is a little bit of a mouthful. So I think it's something more like where are executives located? It sounds a lot better. The goal here is for you to be specific and keep it simple, which I know might not be easy, but it's really worth it for you to do that. Let me just wrap up. We've got a few minutes for some Q&A. So the 3 things that we covered today, my hope is that you'll take at least one of these ideas and try to put it into action for yourself right away. I know we covered a lot in a short time, and don't worry about getting it perfect in terms of the exact execution. If you start along this path, one of the great things about working with Tableau is it's quick for you to make improvements. If it doesn't turn out one way, it's not a lot of work to go back and change it. So keep in mind the 5 traits visual hierarchy, that some visuals are easier for the brain to interpret than others. Try to use the easiest one. When you're using color, use it to focus attention. And lastly, concentrate on turning those statements into questions to really create that engagement, build curiosity with your reader, and draw them into wanting to explore the data more than they might just reading a statement. For the ideas about using questions, I actually have a free ebook that you can download. I'm just going to pop the link actually into the chat here, and so it's a little bit easier for you to get to. And it gives you some starter ideas on how to do this. So rather than me just telling you that, hey, think about questions to ask, it shows you and takes you through some common scenarios that you probably encounter in your work and shows you some options about how to turn statements into questions in the same way that I described it. Last thing is lots of ways you can get in touch with me. I'm always looking to talk and happy to talk about data visualization, data literacy, storytelling, all these topics. I actually have a YouTube channel where I speak with people from the industry and get their views and ideas about things that they've done and where they've been influenced in the world of analytics and data visualization. So there's some really practical ideas there. And feel free to email me or follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. And if you want, just grab a screenshot of this before it goes away, so you've got different ways to grab a hold of me. So thanks again for time, and I'll see if we've got any questions coming in.
Yep, if anyone's got a question for Lee, you could post it to the Q&A and we can address it. That'd probably be the best way, but if you want to speak out live, you could do that as well for the moment. We'll give it a minute, and then you can take it offline with Lee as well via any of these methods in the future as well. But we do need to get to Geoff soon too. His basement's calling.
Seems like there's quite a good discussion about bar charts and our pie charts going on. So I'll send you a link to that you can share with everybody about some stuff I've written about pie charts that might be interesting for them to look at. Yeah,
I've had several people give me different opinions on pie charts, and usually they say it very angrily. Pie charts pies are great for pizzas and for Boston cream, but maybe not as much for Viz all the time, is what I've heard. Let's see here.
Just see one thing in the Q&A.
Yeah, Danielle says, great presentation. Love the idea about phrasing titles as a question. That was a good one. I like that. Well, thank you again, Lee. As I mentioned, if anyone wants to reach out to Lee offline, you've got all the links here. If you just search Lee Feinberg on LinkedIn, if you forget this link, you'll be able to find him that way as well and get to a lot of the other stuff. Thanks again, Lee, for joining us and for presenting. That was really interesting. I liked it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And with that, we get to Geoff's basement. Yes.
Hey, everybody. Just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep.
And then make sure you can see my screen, and we'll carry on. We'll get going.
There we go. Yep.
Yeah. So probably got more to talk about, or more on my mind than I have time to talk about today. But we're going to go do some things. This will be the only slide I'm going to show you guys. Just a real quick history of why the basement keeps getting referenced. 3 years and a couple months ago, when I joined Tableau, my wife had been working from home for most of her career. And I left the pharma industry in a desk job to come be an SE, and told her, hey, the great thing about this job is I'll be working from home when I'm not traveling. And she said, that's fantastic. You can have the basement because I already have the first floor. So my unfinished basement actually is quasi-finished and has a piano, ping pong table, weights, air hockey table, television, everything you would need. Little did I know in 2019 and 2020, but it's everything you need to survive a pandemic and also work from home. So it worked out really well. So enough about that. I do want to jump into just Tuesday, Tableau released 2021.3. And we're going to go through some of these, but I did want to show you guys just real quick some highlights of the new things that are coming out or have now come out with 2021.3. One of the things I want to point out that's like really, really super cool, but folks aren't really going to get it unless you're actually using data flows, is the fact that you can now daisy chain prep flows together, which means that you can take these ridiculously long running flows and now break them up into smaller chunks that may very well improve your performance. And then you can schedule them so that when the first step in the process is done, then it'll kick off the next step, that will kick off the next step, that will kick off the next step. There are some customers who I can't wait to have a conversation with about this, because it's something that they've been looking for and desired to have for a long, long time. The other super cool thing about Tableau Prep and Tableau Prep Conductor is now, if you have data that's missing in your record set that's causing problems when you try to visualize it, it's causing little hiccups or something, where you have time periods or date frames where something's missing, you now have the ability to go in and add those rows of data to your data set so it smooths out your visualizations and makes it look better. I'm not going to go into the full details about how to do that because, to be quite frank, I'm just finding out about it right now, and I don't really know how to do it yet. And I didn't have time to go learn it before this presentation. The next thing that I wanted to point out to you guys is, I don't know anybody who is using Salesforce or Google BigQuery. A couple cool things that come out. SoQuil is the language that is used by Salesforce. It's Salesforce's version of SQL. You can now use SoQuil inside of Tableau. Surprise, surprise. That Salesforce would want Tableau to be able to query against them. And then anybody who's using BigQuery, there's now the ability to leverage essentially, a service account, just like you would do a service account for any database. That for those of you who have been using service accounts for connecting to maybe it's Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle, and when you publish that beautiful dashboard that you want thousands of people to use, you don't really want to use your credentials, and you don't want to use something that's got an expiring password so that it breaks inevitably when you're on vacation, and then you're getting phone calls saying, hey, something broke, it's all down, and you're trying to figure out why you're on the beach. Not cool. So now with Google BigQuery, you can use service accounts. Last thing that I'm going to point out here really is over in this area. You cannot work at Tableau/Salesforce and not talk about Slack. It's really reminiscent of when Tableau got acquired by Salesforce, you had to say Tableau a lot when you were a Salesforce rep. Well, now as a Tableau employee who works for Salesforce, I've got to say Slack a lot. And actually, it's really cool. So we're going to show you what Slack integration looks like. We're going to look at some personal spaces. I just want to make a mention for those of you that have ever wanted to be able to put, when you ship your version of desktop out to users to use, you wanted to put some of your own company examples for them. So the equivalent of your company's version of a Tableau Superstore, you can now do that. And then we might, if we have time, get to, which probably not, but we might get to explaining some more things of explain data. And then there's all this other stuff too. So make sure you check it out. Go to Tableau. If you search in Google, just Tableau release, it'll take you right to the page that's going to show you everything you need to do. You need to know. Now, let's go on and look at, let me hold on just a second. Let me escape here. All right. Let's go have a look at what Tableau and Slack integration looks like. Now, there's a couple things. If you have Slack, there's a couple things that have to happen by the Slack administrator and by the Tableau site or server administrator in order to make this happen. And the first way you'll know if you are on Slack, if it's been enabled, you'll be able to search Tableau. And when Tableau is going to come up, you're going to see this little app called Tableau, Get Insights from Tableau directly in Slack. When you click on it, this little icon is going to show up. Since I've already done it, I can't really do it again. And then when you come into Tableau server, so in this case, I am on a Tableau online site. I'm in as the administrator. There's this great little place now in integrations called Slack integration. And really all you have to do, whoa, why is my, all right, my little demo kit doesn't like Zoom, or Zoom doesn't like to let it work for me. So anyways, they click enable and you say, yep, I want to use it. And then it's set up. And then lastly, as a user, when you come in, so when you log into your Tableau server account, a lot of people might not even know this even exists. But if you go to My Account Settings, you actually come to a place where you can see all of your different settings. You can see your content, your alerts, subscriptions, collections. But here down in settings, as you scroll down, when you have notifications for, you now have the ability to have notifications occurring on Tableau server, if you want them sent via an email, or now, fancy, if you want them to be sent to Slack. So as you can see, system status isn't coming into Slack just yet. However, commenting, sharing, and data alerts all are. So let's go see what it looks like. And there's a reason why I have my screen shared right now. So I am going to go into, let's explore real quick. And you know what? I won't go into Peloton. I will go into my, what did I want to do? We'll just come into here. This is a boring desktop, but you'll get the point. So now when I come into a dashboard, and let's say that I want to make a comment. So I come in, I filter down to something, I find it really interesting, and I want to comment. Now there's Geoff Somerville, who has Tableau, and who I'm going to be talking to today is Geoff Salesforce, because actually my Slack is under my Salesforce at salesforce.com address. So I'm going to mention here, I want to show this picture, and I'm going to say at Geoff, and Geoff Salesforce comes up. Oh no. Well, I'm going to go out of this a second. For anybody who's who has ever been in IT, if there are any IT people here who are wondering, does Tableau server know what's going on? And does it allow you to send information to people who don't have access to data? No, it doesn't. The whole reason why I can't send something is because I forgot to give Geoff Salesforce access to this. So let's come back out here, and I will go into my favorite place to go into. Oh, we're going to come to collections in a second. In this case, we'll open up my Peloton. So anybody who's a Peloton rider and wants to ride sometime or compete against me sometime, it's Summer Pops. My daughter calls me Pops, and for last name Somerville. So hey, it all fit together. But let's go ahead and come into a comment here. Oops. And now I really want to share this, and so it looks a little bit different. Let's just look at workouts, and let's only look at our 30-minute workouts. And I'm going to add this here and say, hey, Geoff Summers, our Salesforce, want to ride sometime. And now I'm going to post, and through the magic of modern technology, bam, there it is. Geoff Somerville, hey, you want to ride sometime? Fantastic. Now, what if I want to make an alert, and I would like for, I want to be notified when, I don't know, I get over 340 as an output on a week, or actually in a single ride, which actually is a fairly good output. So I know I've already hit that. So I'm going to set up a metric here, and I'm just going to say I want it to fire the first time. And instead of to me, I'm going to send it again to my alter ego, Geoff Salesforce. And I'm going to create that alert. And now that alert's been set. And as soon as Tableau server figures it out, it'll fire. And oh, there we go. Tableau server fired it. And here's my alert. My sum of output was above 340. So imagine if it's not your Tableau dashboard of your experiences with Peloton, but it's actually work-related things that you really would like to know, or you'd like other people to know. You can send it to people like that. Now, another thing that you can do, and the last thing that I'm going to show you with Slack is, how many of you have ever published this super cool, awesome dashboard and you cannot wait for the world to see it, and you want everybody to know about it? Well, let me just do this real quick. Let me just change this to la, 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 la. Sorry about this. I'm just letting people see stuff. So now what I can do is, if I want to share a dashboard and I come to share, it's the same place. So I can call my username and send an email, but also if you have groups. So in this case, I forget if I have any groups set up. I got HLS groups. Okay. So now if I come and I want to share to an entire group of people, I can come in here and I can share. So there's a lot of different places where you can share, but if I type HLS, it's not working. Anyways, last thing I'll show you. Maybe you can't share with groups. Full transparency, guys, I just set this up actually while the first presenter was talking. So I haven't had a chance to figure out all the kinks. But when I share a workbook, I press share and it's shared, and instantly it comes up and says, hey, this has been shared with you, and here's a link that will take you back to that site. So pretty awesome stuff. More to come with Slack integration. It's only going to get better and better, but I can't wait to see where this is headed. Enough about Slack. Let's go on. What did I want to talk about next? Let's show collections real quick. How do I get this thing out? Oh, there we go. So if you've never used collections, I just want to show you what they are. A collection is a way to organize information into maybe different ways of things that aren't how you're. So you know, in Tableau you have sites, you have a server, and then within a server you have a site, and a site is usually kind of siloed by groups of people. So like Tableau Online, every site is a different company. And then within sites, you have projects, and you can do nested projects, but really you could have a project that is set up for finance, a project that's set up for sales, a project that's set up for marketing, a project that's set up for you name it. And all of them can be creating different assets, but different leaders look across all of these different places. And yes, you can do like what we just did, share all of that content to that specific leader, and they'll have a bunch of great links over in Slack. And I'm going to get rid of Slack here for a second. So whoops. So we can go and look at this in a little bit bigger picture. But there's going to be times where you might want to share things that are in multiple different locations. So here, what I've done is I've gone across all of the different project areas, all the different people that use this particular server. It's an HLS server that's used by solution engineers. And I've put them all together because I kept having people come to me and saying, hey, what are all of the different assets that we have for clinical trial related dashboards? And it's not just dashboards. It can also be data sets. It can be a lot of things. So I just want you to be aware of collections. And it's a really good thing to go think about what are the different ways that you could organize all of those dashboards that you've spent so much time on to even get more utilization from them. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about Ask Data a little bit, because Ask Data has changed. So in the last release we introduced, which was 2021.2, we released this concept of lenses. Now, so anybody, if you've never seen Ask Data before, this is what Ask Data looks like, or at least the initial part of Ask Data. When you come in, you can actually see all of the different fields that are in the published data source. By the way, it has to be a published data source, not any embedded data source, in order for Ask Data to work. But I've got all these different fields, and inevitably, we all work with really large data sets that maybe we put together as a hodgepodge of different things because we didn't know exactly what we wanted, or it might be what we had access to. And there's always way more fields than what you may really need. So one of the ways to get rid of those fields is, before you even publish the data source, you can hide those fields in Tableau Desktop and then publish them. But let's say you forget it, or let's say there's let me paint a different picture. Let's say you have a data set that could be used for different groups of people. Well, with data lenses, what you have the ability to do is to come in and, make a new I'm going to just make this lens. We'll plug it here. And when I come in to create a new lens, I can see all the fields, but then I can come in here and I can edit it. And you can basically take away all of the fields that you don't want people asking questions about. And also, if there's multiple like date fields, and when people are asking questions that are going to reference things, and I'm purposely like taking a bunch of stuff off, just so you guys get the point, it greatly reduces the amount of fields that are available for the Ask Data engine to handle when people are trying to ask questions. So if you have somebody who is from accounting or finance, they may be asking different sets of questions than somebody who is a clinical trial operations manager. You could actually publish the same data set because there's information there about both. It could be about what money is being spent on clinical trials, but not only can you create different lenses, but the synonyms that you use in those lenses to call out things the way that different people talk, you can use different sets of synonyms for different sets of people, same underlying data source, multiple lenses. So pretty cool stuff. And I'm going to come back to my data source here, and I want to show you a little bit more about where am I at. Okay, I'm doing okay. We're going to come back into our site feasibility, and I am going to leverage my sorry, I have a fly that's flying around. I promise my basement is cleaned up, even though it's not finished. But anyways, so here's the lens that I've created. Notice it's a much smaller subset of fields than what were originally used. And you don't necessarily need to understand how this works, but or what this data source is for what I'm wanting to show you. But what I want you to understand is that there are some new ways that Tableau is trying to help people learn how to use Ask Data. And what you'll see is I want to ask the question, how many? So it's interpreting, it's telling you that there's now these signs that if it's going to be some type of aggregation, you get this aggregation sign. And then how many, what do I want to, trials. So then it's going to tell you Well, hey, where's it coming from? So NCTID has a synonym called trials. NCTID is from ct.gov. Sorry, I'm in healthcare and life sciences. It's the life I live. But you see that by this square, I can see that this is a text field that is a dimension. And then I can say by country, and it's telling me, okay, it's by country again, and it's hey, do you want to use a distinct count or a count? In this case, count is fine, or distinct count is actually fine, because, and you can go switch it. And when I hit enter, what's super cool now is I've seen kind of what question I'm answering. I know how Tableau is treating it. And because I asked something that has a geospatial component, country, it automatically brings back a visualization that shows off country. Well, that's great. I want to go and ask another question. And, you know, so let me show you again how many trials by country. Well, we're back to where we started, but what if I want to ask some other things? So I want to know by study phase. So when I type in phase, now it's showing me by phase, but it's also saying, hey, do you want to filter by phase 3, 2, 1, or 4? I'm not ready to filter yet, but when I go here, it's gonna again feel that geospatial component in country, and then it's gonna lattice out what I'm seeing by each phase. You know, back to the presenter before me, this probably isn't the best way to visualize the number of trials by countries. Well, in Ask Data, it's been around a while, but it's actually becoming more and more robust. I now have the ability to do a stack bar chart, and now I can come in here and I can organize it. And I've got two sheets here, and I've got a couple different questions that I've answered. Well, now what? What do I do with that? What if I want to save this? Well, in the past, somebody would have had given you access to a project somewhere to be able to save it. However, starting with 2021.3, as long as it's been enabled by your administrator, anybody who is a creator and explorer who is leveraging Tableau server now has this save button where I can come in and I can save as, and can say tug viz. And notice up here, I've got a new place, a new location called personal space. And I'm gonna go ahead and it doesn't matter. I'm gonna go ahead and save that. And now I'm saving these two Ask Data visualizations that were generated by what I wanted to ask that was outside of maybe the dashboard that I put in. But now I'm in web edit mode where I can easily come in and I can take, oops, I didn't mean to make a sheet. I meant to add a dashboard. Now, what if I want to bring those two things together? Because I want to see how it's interacting. This is web editing, looks a whole lot like Tableau Desktop. And for anybody who's been around Tableau, or maybe you're brand new to Tableau, but if you haven't visited web editing for a while, I would strongly encourage you to. We keep making it better and better and better. There is not, it's still not quite to parity of Tableau Desktop, but it is really good. And now here I've just created a dashboard so where if I want to see what the bottom portion is, I can go ahead and filter that. I can come here and now I can see, I can interact. Maybe I just want, this isn't a great dashboard that's going to offer you a whole lot, but it will, allow you to come in and see and interact. Now, where is that at? I'm going to save that. And now what I want to do is I want to come in, and it says Tom Kern, by the way, because I'm on a different server. And Tom is one of my peers, and we have collaborated on a few things. And I didn't realize I was logged into him. But anyways, here's my dashboard. Now I'm going to come back I've got my tog viz where we're going to see the 3 different vizzes that are available. But actually what I want to do is I want to come over here and I want to come into my personal space. And now I've got my 2 dashboards that are in my personal space. Now, personal space can only be used to save workbooks that you either do web editing to and you want to save from the original. If you connect to a published data source and you create a new workbook, or if you're in Ask Data and you want to save your analysis from Ask Data. That is what personal spaces can be used as of today with this first release. I think that, excuse me, I think they're going to extend that, but that's for the first release. Excuse me. I am going to just really quickly show you guys. I know in my last presentation, I actually touched on and went through it really quickly, explain data. I would ask that anybody who is wanting to help people see and understand their data better, go take a look. Again, in 2021.2, explain data and ask data were made available to all users in role-based environments. And if your core-based environment, you already could have had access to it anyways, which means that viewers, explorers, and creators can all leverage explain data. It's really has improved quite a lot to where now the types of information that they're explaining to you, that they're trying to bring to you to help you understand, really does help you see things. In this case, I'm trying to explain why a sales rep does better than other sales reps. And what I can see here as I blow out that sales rep happens to have more in-person meetings than everybody else. Go have a look at that again. The final thing, and for the last 5 minutes that I have here, is if I haven't gone through enough, is I want to touch on, and this is something that Alex and I were speaking about earlier this week, or emailing back and forth about earlier this week. It's kind of a different concept of using and leveraging set actions in order to create a look and feel of almost like an application. Here, what we're looking at is, again, sorry for it being a life sciences, pharma themed dashboard, but that's the life I live. We wanted to be able to come through here and, apply some different filters. My server timed out, so it's going to refresh. All right, I wanted to come in here and pick a few filters. In this case, I'm just going to pick one. And what I want to do is I want to start off by selecting what countries that I want to take a deeper dive in and look at. And so I come through here and I can apply any of these different filters. In this case, I'm just going to apply one. And basically, I now really like these 3 countries. So I'm going to select all of them. And notice when I clicked on select all, which is a trick, and I'll show you here in a second, these 3 countries showed up. And then over here, if it's like, oops, oh, I really didn't mean to select United States, I can click on United States here. It drops from the list. If I want to add it back, I can come over here and just click on the United States. So we're building out dynamic lists here. And so now that I have that list, I can go and kind of drill down. Now it's filtered down. This dashboard is filtered by the countries that I've selected. We've got lots of different information that's coming in here. By the way, this is Einstein Discovery for Tableau, which was introduced in 2021.1. I'm not going to go into that a whole lot, but just know that it is a way for you to bring predictive and prescriptive analytics directly into your Tableau dashboard. So for instance, here, what this is telling me is of the three countries that I selected, with all the sites that are within those 3 countries, my feasibility score, which is the closer it is to 1, the more likely the site is to be, quote, perfect. And the lower it is, the worse off that site is going to be. My aggregate of all sites that I've selected so far is at 68%. I can come in here again and apply some filters. And the one that I'm going to apply here is I only want sites that have a feasibility of 75% or higher. And now I've gone in and I've selected all of that. I've got this picked out. Whoops, went to the wrong spot. And I want to hide my filter. I can see how things have changed. And now I want to select all of those sites. I do. Now I've just selected a bunch of sites and I'd like to take a look at it. And now we have kind of this final view of different things where we can come in, we can see all of our sites. And then right here, if people want to, God forbid, because I hate it when people do this, but all of us live in the real world where there are people who want to have images, who want to have crosstabs, who want to have stuff back into their beloved Excel. Here we can have that set up to make it really easy for them to do that. 53, I have 2 minutes, so I can show you how it was done. Now we're in Tableau Desktop, and I just want to show you real quick how this is done. It's all done through sets and set actions. So if I come into my dashboard and I have my actions, we're going to come to my country select. And basically what it is saying is this, when I interact with this viz within this dashboard, when I select something, I want to pass it into, I want to add to my set. The set I'm going to add to is called selected countries. And when I deselect from here, it just leaves things in the set. To the contrary, if I want to remove something from that list, like when I clicked on the United States and it dropped off, here is my selected countries visualization. When I select something from there, I want to remove values from the set. However, when I'm not hovering on or when I deselect that, I want it to keep everything in that set. So it's two actions. One is adding to the set, one is removing from the set, but both, when you aren't highlighting, it leaves things into the set. And then you simply use that set to filter on that next page to bring in those selected countries. Now, because I have none selected, this is blanked out. I'll select one. We got a selected country now. And now we'll come over and I've got my selected countries. The final thing, the trick, the select all trick is one that all it is I typed in, I came up here and I clicked on a pill. I put in a select all pill. And now because that is there and it's not tied to anything, I can put it anywhere on the screen because Tableau is always going to order things in a pivot table. That select all, and let me drag the one I just created off the screen, is going to be there for all records. And so you can create a quote select all to the left of a list, and there you go. So Alex, I went a minute over into your outro. But I'll pause for any questions and hopefully I didn't go through too much stuff.
No, Geoff, you're fine. I could use maybe 2 minutes. If you wanted to check the Q&A and see what's in there, there's a couple questions in there.
Sure. If I could find where Zoom disappeared to.
Yeah.
When PowerPoint decides to share, it makes Zoom go into a hidden window. Let me stop sharing here. All right. Sorry. Okay. How'd you get the filter to pop out with the feasibility filters? That is that's just a show and hide container. So if I bring a horizontal or vertical container onto the screen, I'm holding down, well, what you want to do is if you hold down the shift key as you bring it in, it floats. And let me just change this real quick so you can actually see it. I've got a new background. You can then bring in whatever visualizations you want into that.
If you're showing us something, we can't see it.
Oh, did it stop? Ah, thanks, man. I think we're back. So let me show you again. So I'm going to bring a container onto the screen, holding down the shift key. So it's a float. It has to be a float. And what I'm saying, I'm just changing the background so you can actually see where it is. This little toggle box of the layer, you have a button called show and hide button. When you do that, it kind of shows up right here. And now holding down the Option key on Windows, or actually when you go into the screen share, now when I click on this, it's showing and hiding that container, just like it shows and hides my filters. What was the second question?
Says, I have spent a lot of time trying to research, build a way to minimize filter screens. I'm not sure if that's a question really or a comment.
Might be a comment. Yeah, the show and hide containers is definitely a really nice thing to do. Now, with this one, you see how the screen is shrinking and growing. It is leveraging, instead of a floating container, it's a container that I embedded inside of a horizontal container that the rest of this visualization is contained in, so that when it needs the space to display the filters, it shrinks everything else. And then when that's gone, it hides it. So just a little trick.
All right. Well, Geoff, if you don't mind, I'll take 30 or 45 seconds at the very end here. And thank you very much for presenting. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there. There's just some people already having to pop out for their 1 p.m. I'm just going to show a couple slides really quickly. One, just a reminder that the Tableau conference is coming up in November. If you just go to Tableau's site, you'll find it really easy. It's free still this year in virtual. But the other thing I wanted to call out real quick for anyone who's still here, we are looking for anyone who wants to join our steering committee. So we've got 3 members on here right now, Catherine, Vinay, and I. And you know, if someone else would like to join us and help, that'd be great. You know, as it says here, generating session ideas, finding speakers, doing postings, and new ideas, right? People who have a different approach, have some unique perspectives, perhaps. You can find me on LinkedIn, my email, alex_pataki@baxter.com, whichever you like. LinkedIn will be easiest probably now because we've got to go. But thank you, everyone, for coming. Our next meeting will be November 18th, so a week before the Thanksgiving week, so everyone will still be working, hopefully. And we'll see you then. Thank you, everyone, very much. And that's it for the meeting. There is a last question for anyone who wants to stick around. And Geoff, is that viz available on public?
I don't think it is yet, but it will be. And it's under Tableau HLS is our little handle where all of our different vizzes and life sciences get published.
Tell you what, I can chat with you offline, and whenever it does become public, I can post a chat about it to the LinkedIn. Okay.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for coming, and thanks Geoff, and Lee and Amanda, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.